With us in the studio today is the one and only political consultant extraordinaire, Jaime Rodriguez. How are you doing, my brother?
Howdy, welcome. Thank you for letting me in, even at the last minute. That's okay.
No, this is not at the last minute. You could have come and said, hey, I don't care what you're talking about today. You will get me in.
This is more important.
This is more, actually it is
than
more
all
important.
the world politics.
Actually, it is very much more important because you know something that I hear you say all the time. And that is all politics is local.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And this is a very important local event that actually does affect the state and the nation.
We are all multidimensional, and popular culture has an effect on most of us in some manner. And Jaime, as you know, because I've met you in DC several times where we did all the other stuff, isn't it true that all of this sort of form one thing, popular culture and politics?
It's true. I mean, look, one of the things that you're talking about is we marched with Bernie Sanders there in D.C.
Right.
And, I mean, if Bernie Sanders is not the height of pop culture, I don't know what is.
That was a fun time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was something with the NAACP.
It was the 50th anniversary of the march from Selma to D.C., and we took the last leg from Virginia across the Memorial Bridge.
That was
the
fun.
Lincoln Memorial,
in D.C. So, I mean, and Jaime was there taking pictures. Jaime is a consultant, but he's a lot more than a consultant in all the videos and stuff that he did. Anyway, firstly, we are all multidimensional, as I spoke. We are all multidimensional in this world, and politics is a part of it. And if the more we can integrate politics into the everyday world of what young people are doing, what older folks are doing, we will become even more politically engaged. Hey, continue it. I watched Chris Rock on Netflix at 1 a.m. while spinning. It was clear that the Will Smith slap at the Oscars has affected Chris Rock's comedy. He was not as naturally funny as he normally is, in my humble opinion. He went really hard on Jada Pinkett Smith as well. I think Rock was harder on Jada Pinkett Smith than he was on Will Smith, which I think opens the door for a discussion on sexism, which is the political part that I wanted to talk about. That said, it was Chris Rock who was initially harmed. Chris Rock displayed a great degree of restraint when Will Smith hit him. When he slapped him, he didn't create a brawl. He went to, and he was a responsible one. He showed that you don't have to strike back at the moment to escalate things. I'll be the bigger person. I'll take it. Because you notice, Tori, nobody ran up there when he got slapped and held down Will Smith. Nobody was there to hold back Will Smith. Will Smith punched him and Chris Rock did the right thing and maintained his composure. So he was harmed. The one caveat or the one thing that I saw that I think all of us, those of us who are men, those of us who carry the male genes, I don't care what's happening between Chris Rock, Jada Pinkett Smith, and Will Smith. I think we have to be cognizant that somehow when there is any kind of mishap that a woman is involved and a man is involved, that somehow the woman gets the biggest part of the brunt. Because if you take a look at the ending, and he did this at the end of the show, he was extremely hard on Jada Pinkett Smith. And I'm not defending her, but it shows the same kind of sexism we see in today's politics. The way Hillary was treated versus others. The way, and it's not a Republican or Democratic thing. Women just seem to take the brunt of much more than men do. I brought Chris Rock into the fold here because I want to tell my male brothers, my male part holding brothers, we have to be careful, even when we are harmed, we have to be careful in the way we address these issues relative to women. Because again, like I said, Chris Rock was the one that was aggrieved. But at the same time, when Chris Rock lashed back, yes, he lashed back at Will Smith as well, but he was much harsher on Jada Pinkett Smith. And Jada Pinkett Smith wasn't the one that slapped the you-know-what out of him. So let's be cognizant about that. Anyhow, Senor Rodriguez, tell us a little bit about what's going on with the Harris County Democratic Party, and where are we at? Why do we need a new chair, etc.?
Yeah, it's a good question. Just some stats before we explain what's happening. Harris County has a population that's bigger than 27 states in the country.
Right.
And we have no senators in our state that represent us. As a Democratic county, we have no senators.
Right.
And there are 27 other states that have multiple senators, even though they only have one congressman.
Right.
Because they don't have the population to support one congressman. We have 5 congressional seats in Harris County. So it's a big deal, this county. We have 4 state Senate seats. We have over 21 state House seats. A lot rides on Harris County. And in the state of Texas, of course, being the largest county, we actually account for 1 in 5 Democratic votes in the state of Texas. And so whoever leads the Democratic Party in this county, it's a very special position. It's a very important position, but it's also a tough position. And to top it all off, it's a volunteer position. And so
let me stop you there, Jaime. Why is it a volunteer position? I think a county this important, a bellwether county, it seems sort of silly. I hate to use that word, to have a county chair that is not paid and being able to organize. It almost seems like it's a power play on the part of the system.
And it's even more difficult than that. Not only do they not get paid, they don't have a stipend or a budget. So if they want to travel to D.C., for example, on behalf of the county, it's out of their own pocket. And so, what's interesting, though, when you create an organization, especially one that has volunteers involved,
right,
usually what happens is you have a paid staff that's a professional staff.
Right.
And then you have the volunteer side. And so the president of a board, the president of they're usually not paid.
Right.
It's not actually that unusual for them not to be paid, but they usually have a budget.
Right.
They usually have a stipend, gas money at the very least,
right,
to spend. And the reason for that is because usually the job of that kind of person, the executive or the chief, is a fundraiser.
Right.
That's they're meant to be the face of the organization.
You're talking about the chair, right?
The chair is meant to be the face of the organization, and they're meant to be a fundraiser. Whereas the paid professional staff runs the day-to-day budget and whatnot. That's the way it's meant to be. And the precinct chairs, so basically you think of a precinct as a neighborhood in the county. They're over almost 1,000
I'm a precinct chair.
Exactly. And so we have about 500 precinct chairs in office right now that are elected. You were on the ballot,
right,
to get elected to be a precinct chair. They actually are the ones that will be voting on the new chair because it's just to fill out the seat. But in the spring of next year, during the Democratic primary, every one of us in Harris County will have the opportunity to vote on that ballot and choose our chair. And so, whoever gets elected right now on March 19th, they're basically signing up for a 1-year program.
Right.
And then they've got to run officially countywide. But again, they're going to have to raise money for a position that's unpaid. This is not like running for a county commissioner seat or a congressional seat where you're going to get a very nice salary. And, as a county commissioner, you get a $30 million budget. You can basically do anything you want with. This is not that kind of a seat.
Now, how exactly then how can that actually change? I think it is terrible.
The precinct chairs have actually been very consistent on their messaging on this, and they're the only ones that can change the laws and bylaws of the county party in this regard. And the precinct chairs have actually voted down the idea of giving the chair any kind of compensation or money to do their job. So that suggests that the precinct chairs want a professional staff to be paid professionally. But that has also...
Wait, I don't understand what you just said.
You would have an executive director,
right,
and they would hire, let's say, a press communications director, press secretary.
Right. So does the chairs want that in the aggregate? Are you saying
the precinct chairs seem to want that model? So they've been voting that way. But as implemented, it has not really been implemented that way. The volunteer chair who's been elected has usually taken the reins and been the one in charge, kind of putting the weight of the county on their own shoulders. And so...
Do we have a director right now?
We have had executive directors, and we've had very smart, intelligent executive directors, but not always people with a resume that looks like a professional director. So even though they've done great jobs and they've fundraised and they've held events and all that, they don't necessarily have a background that suggests they're, if you come straight out of medical school, you're not going to be the chief surgeon tomorrow at the hospital. You need at least a good 10 years under your belt before you're going to be the chief surgeon. And the same kind of thing is happening here, where if you're really going to be serious about running the county, you want people with a resume that remembers, at least remembers the first Obama election. And, if they can remember the Clinton elections, that's even better, probably.
Now, as far as the Republican Party, do they operate similarly, or
they have a similar organizational style? But the difference is Republicans, by and large, know how to pay their people,
right?
And then they listen to the people that they're paying,
right?
They're used to a lot. By and large, if they're business-minded people, they know how to hire consultants and they pay them. And you're not going to pay someone your good money if you're not going to listen to them,
right?
And so Democrats are not always that way. First of all, a lot of us are just either working class people or people that don't have a lot of business experience, and so we're not used to hiring consultants and listening to someone else. We're used to making it on our own by our pulling our boots up, and so it's a very different party, the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party.
Well, you're generally an advisor and a consultant. That I heard you speaking to one of our engineers in here. I think, in my humble opinion, that is, we're going to have to somehow put add that activist nature to you with where it comes to probably not instructing, but enlightening the party as how one can work more effectively. Because I think when you mention about us being the type of bellwether that we are, there's a whole lot more that probably needs to be done to sort of tighten things up. And it's good for the county all around.
I liken it to, and my friends always laugh because I talk about this a lot, but I was on the National Committee of the Boy Scouts of America. I'm an Eagle Scout and all that. The Boy Scouts have a training continuum that is amazing. From the day that you sign up as a volunteer adult, and as a student, of course, there's a lot of training, but there's hand-holding all the way through. There is no hand-holding or training in the Democratic Party. There's some videos online that you can look at that the DNC and DCCC put out, but 1-minute videos, that's nice, that's helpful, but there's not hand-holding. If someone in Harris County says, I want to join the Democratic Party, there's not a process to bring them into the fold. And as a precinct chair, there's not a lot of training that says this is what a precinct chair is supposed to do. If you're in charge of a whole neighborhood, a neighborhood could have 7,000 people in Harris County, a precinct. How are you supposed to be in charge of 7,000 people with no training? And that's a volunteer position that you're doing. And so we need a lot of training, which again goes back to, if you have professionals who know what they're doing, they can create training modules and they could provide a lot of training. And that's one of the things we're going to want to look for in the new chair is that they're interested in providing training. In Texas right now, of course, oil and gas is king, and Texas was the oil producer of the world until the 1930s. It wasn't the greenback that ruled the world. It was the oil dollar, the price of oil, Texas crude. And so Texas has a history of oil and gas. We get it. But it's also the energy capital of the world at this point too, and that's not just oil and gas. That is all the alternative energies are here in Texas, and they could be expanded. But right now, one of the things he's talking about is that on the Rio Grande River, they're building the border wall, and they are literally saying all the environmental laws that exist. There are actually 7 governing bodies that are in charge of the Rio Grande River. All 7 of those bodies were put aside, and the federal government went ahead and built the wall, even though they did not agree. And some of those bodies are from the country of Mexico that are supposed to. It's supposed to be joint agreements when you do anything on that river. And we just pushed them aside, did our own thing. That's affecting a lot. But then you start looking at where the Eagle Ford Shale area is, just south of the Hill Country in Texas, just south of San Antonio. A lot of the people that live on the Rio Grande River make their living working the Eagle Ford Shale. And so they work in the oil and gas industry. Now, the only access they had to water has been taken out, so they can't farm anymore. They can't raise cattle and things because they don't have access to that water.
The wall is there.
The wall is there. So you really have isolated them and made them only dependent on oil and gas in that area. And these are towns and cities that are made up of 5 or 6 families, large family. I mean, these are, I'm slightly exaggerating,
Right.
but that's kind of how they are. They have nowhere else to go. They have no other source of living or income. They have to make it on that. And so, it's very difficult if we don't give them alternatives. And we have to be supporting alternatives, or else all of the Democrats who are definitely Democrats living on the border, they have nowhere else to go. They have no other way to make a living outside of the Eagle Ford Shale.
So in effect, they make them dependent on...
The GOP has done a wonderful job of making them dependent on oil and gas and giving them no alternatives. And now they want to do LNG down in the Port of Brownsville, and that area is one of the only areas that's a wildlife refuge, and the way that the sand and the dunes are still there. We call it South Padre Island, but if you know Texas, it's actually Padre Island.
Right. It's a
North Padre Island is outside of Corpus Christi. It's 100-mile long island, and so the northern part has about 5 miles of territory, and the southern part has about 5 miles of territory that have been commercialized. But everything in the middle is really meant for things like the turtles that come and they nest there every year, and it's pristine land. If you have one spill or one accident with the LNG, then you have a real problem.
They always talk about, but things. It's unlikely to happen, and when it happens, they are not even begging for forgiveness. They're just, spills happen. It is funny because I had dinner this weekend with an oil executive, actually, and I think for quite a while, this person didn't quite... I think in the initial part of the discussion, this person was only talking about efficiencies, because, all these corporations always talk about efficiencies. They never talk about humanity.
Yeah.
Not because something is more efficient to make more dollars for your stockholders and to have less employees mean it is good for society. Sometimes you get rid of efficiency because things are more humane. And folks, so those of you that are listening to me, I want you to understand that concept, right? Companies right now are trying to get to maximal efficiency. What that means is using more robots. That part isn't bad. I don't have a problem with that. But then also, if you have a long train that's used to be 50 cars and now it's 100 cars, or now 150 cars, and because they have a remote guy at the end of the train, they say, we can get rid of 3 or 4 more brake persons. So that 150 car train is dependent on maybe a computer that may tell them that something is wrong if all the sensors are working fine. But even if there's something wrong, you only have one person on the train. What you got to do? Wait for a helicopter to bring folks to take care of. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you what's even more cynical of that. Mm-hmm. So the way that our trade laws work, anything that comes in by cargo, by boat,
right,
is taxed differently than things that enter by land.
Right.
So, and by land, it's cheaper, the taxes.
Right.
So what ends up happening is these ships will come and deposit things, let's say at the Port of Brownsville. 18-wheelers will pick them up and drive them 2 miles down the road to Mexico.
Right.
Turn around, and then they enter by land, technically.
Right.
You see? And so then they pay less taxes. So anything that you can do to support the Port of Brownsville, making it bigger, more efficient, more able to accept different cargo and different types of cargoes, makes it cheaper for the companies. Because now you don't come into the Port of Houston and pay import tax by cargo. Now you're actually paying land import tax through Mexico.
It is sad that, again, remember, whenever, some people give me a hard time because you're always so hard on corporations. And that is because the nature of corporations the executives of these corporations are doing what they're supposed to do.
Right.
They are maximizing profits for their shareholder. They are maximizing their own well-being with their bonuses, etc. They are doing exactly what Milton Friedman, the latest master capitalist, say to do. Forget about society. Forget about morality. This is what Milton Friedman, the latest god of capitalism, said. You corporate executives, you owe nothing to people. You owe nothing to society. You don't be talking about women's rights. You don't be talking about environmental rights. You forget about those issues. Your sole purpose is to maximize the profits for your shareholders. I didn't say it. Look it up. Milton Friedman said it. So all of my listeners who are always defended, I'm not talking about most, I'm saying the ones that are always defending the corporations, remember that. It is written that you don't count. Remember that. Their sole purpose there's efficiencies. Let me tell you something, Jaime. This is what drives me crazy, right? A company gets very efficient. They build robots so they lay folks off. They get trains that are longer and they put a computer at the tail end of that train and they lay off 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 employees and they don't give them sick pay because they want to make sure that they have to be there, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, sick leave because they want to make sure that they're there, et cetera, et cetera. So all these efficiencies we created. And the efficiencies also mean more money is made in profits. Instead of us getting a shorter work week because we created the efficiencies, we work the same, just less of us work. Those that don't work are now dependent on the government for our taxes for those who work. The guys who make profits get their profits in the form of capitalization. Means, okay, we're not going to give you only dividends. We're going to buy back stocks to raise the price of stocks so that you get capital gains. And wait a minute, capital gains are taxed at a lower rate than dividends.
Yeah.
Folks, you're being screwed. Okay?
And you know, you hear it all. It's funny if you even just watching TikTok and some of these kind of Facebook reels and things, you see all these people advising business people saying, you know, the CEO of Exxon last year made $50 million, but the investor who invested big time made $500 million.
Yes.
And they say, you know, and so that's. It's better to be the investor than to be the worker.
Yes.
Is the way that they're saying it.
Yes.
And so you want to be the owner. You don't want to be the one working, you know?
Yeah.
But they're even laughing at CEOs of Fortune 500 companies for being workers.
Yes.
I mean, that's what's so phenomenal in today's age, you know, and you start to look at what is the trend in America right now for young people. The trend, of course, is that you want to be super famous online,
right? And
the rewards are millions of dollars per month at that age group in the early 20s,
right,
to be famous online, famous for being famous. I mean,
right,
that really, we've actually come to that point. You know, when the Kardashians and Paris Hilton and all that started, they were actually models. It's very hard work to be a real model and all that. The people that are doing it now, they're making millions for basically doing nothing. And that's the reward system we're building in America right now.
Yeah.
Whereas all the other countries in the world, they're building workers that know how to get things done.
And you know, it's so amazing that you said that because, you know, a lot of the young people are going to say, well, yeah, I know I'm just being famous for being famous, but that shareholder is just sitting on his butt.
That's right.
And he's not, you know,
that's what they're training Americans to do.
They're getting the work away. You know, the work ethic is gone. You know,
and they laugh at you for not being rich or not being whatever successful means. You know, and laugh at you for having to work for a living.
It's amazing because you remember when Hillary Clinton was was debating Trump. And she talked about him not paying any taxes. He said, that's because I'm smart. In other words, those other people pay taxes.
That's right.
You know, what everybody is saying. Folks, we have to wake ourselves up. And, you know, I'm proud to be woke. So my brother, a good supporter of this show, Lee Grant, says, actually, many major corporations have gone woke. So it's not just profits, but moral preening too. Hey, I believe in being woke. They're not really woke, though. There's a false woke to bring the woke in.
Think about Starbucks.
Yes.
Starbucks is what most people consider a woke company.
Right.
And yet, in Texas, there are only 3 locations that are unionized.
Imagine that.
You know? And one of them here right next to the Kingwood College, just unionized a few weeks ago. You know, that was the epitome of what progressives think of as woke companies.
Yes.
So Apple, everybody thinks, wow, Apple's so progressive.
They're not woke.
What the practices that they practice in other countries to make those products, that would scare the bejesus out of most Americans.
Exactly. It is funny because, why I always talk about the inflation that we talk about. Oh, supply chain problem. There's only a supply chain problem because the corporate structure created that. They went ahead and decided that we're going to manufacture everything overseas.
Somewhere else.
And then we can't build it, and then we don't want to pay taxes for climate change. We don't want to pay taxes to make things better. And suddenly we get a pandemic and the ships are not coming in. And we created another crazy thing called just-in-time inventory, which means, hey, we don't even keep storage. Those ships better keep coming in. And if something stops that ship, the line's shut down.
And meanwhile, since you brought up that subject, in the meanwhile, the last administration tried to do a trade war with China.
Yes.
And told our farmers not to sell our goods to China. China was kind of doing us a favor by buying our goods, our farmers. They can produce as much rice and wheat and whatever they want. And the Ukraine actually is one of the places that used to provide a lot of, which is why Putin and China and everybody's interested in Ukraine. But all of that is saying that our last administration started a trade war, and we were on the losing side of that trade war. Our farmers have not recovered from that trade war. So now shipping containers come from Asia over here full, but we have no reason to send the shipping containers back there. We're not sending them anything. So they stack up empty
in here.
Hey,
they're building walls with it now, man. But it is true. 713-526-5738. If you want to say something real quickly, 713-526-5738, extension numero dos, extension number 2, 713-526-5738. But yeah, so I mean, the last subject that I had was called "We Reward Those Destroying Us" because it fits right in. Sure. And I always know, based on what we're doing, that we can connect all. Imagine we could connect Chris Rock to the Democratic Party in Harris County, to what's going on well, check this out. We reward those destroying us. The reason we continue to have our environment placed in peril, our healthcare remains an immoral, inhumane mess, and our social safety net a disaster of inconsistencies, is that we don't reward excellence, but gangsters. And I call them gangsters. Gangsters are the ones just taking your stuff, right? And that's what our economic system does now. It just take your stuff because they can, right? They do it with a smile, though. And they don't put a gun to your head. They use something that is a lot more effective. They enchain your mind. They enslave your minds. But anyhow, I've restarted our series called A Better Human Story with Andrew Schmuckler, and you'll start seeing that this week, which explores much of this. Andrew Schmuckler is an older guy from West Virginia. He ran for Senate in West Virginia, and he thinks he's very progressive. He's somewhere in the middle, but I love the guy because we have some good, healthy conversations.
He should be trying.
Yeah, but he's a good guy. I mean, he really wants a better world, and so he created this website called a Better Human Story. And I think it's important that we highlight those kinds of things from people who want to do things that are positive. Sure. I hope with this program here, Jaime, I hope to earn enough trust in people that they can, because everything I say, I always tell them, don't listen to what I say. Fact check what I'm saying. I have no problem with you fact checking me, but the goal is to raise people's awareness and let people know that they are already empowered with their vote to really make things happen.
And how important is that local component of this? Rex Tillerson is a Houston homegrown boy.
Yes.
Rex Tillerson, the one we were just talking about, is from here.
Right.
Harris County really has a lot of effect on the world. So if you're growing up or if you're living in Harris County, you have actually more access to changing the world than a lot of people living in other places. The political climate and the political system here will allow it, but you got to get involved.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number 1, subscribe to our channel, and number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.